Welcome back to the channel, where we explore the greatest mysteries and the most unbelievable engineering marvels of our skies. Today we uncover the true giant of aviation, the monster plane, the Antonov AN-225. The world of aviation had witnessed giants before, massive wingspans, thunderous engines, and aircraft that pushed the boundaries of engineering. But nothing prepared humanity for the arrival of a machine so large, so powerful, and so ambitious that its very silhouette against the horizon made people freeze in awe. Before this monster came to life, engineers, pilots, and dreamers spent decades imagining an aircraft capable of lifting not just heavy cargo, but the future itself. That dream began in the Cold War era, when nations raced toward the stars and the Soviet Union searched for a way to carry its most fragile treasure, the space shuttle. At the heart of this ambition stood a challenge unmatched by any aircraft of its time. The space shuttle program required transportation of massive orbital vehicles across long distances. Vehicles too large for trains, too delicate for ships, and too essential for the future of space exploration. To solve the problem, Soviet engineers needed more than a cargo plane. They needed a flying colossus, a machine with wings wide enough to cradle spacecraft, with engines strong enough to pull mountains into the sky, and with landing gear so complex that it could support the weight of a small ship. It was not merely engineering, it was reinvention. From the earliest sketches, the concept looked impossible. The wingspan had to exceed anything ever flown. The structure had to endure punishing stresses. The frame had to stay stable even under unpredictable loads carried on its back. And still, the aircraft had to remain controllable, agile enough to land on runways that were never designed for such a beast. Every requirement grew the blueprint larger, heavier, more intimidating. Yet every challenge also pulled the engineers deeper into their obsession. They were crafting not just an airplane, but a spectacle of human capability. As construction began, the world around the project was changing. The Cold War intensified. Competition soared. Every nation pushed limits in science and technology. Inside a massive Ukrainian hangar, surrounded by towering scaffolding, the skeleton of the future's largest aircraft began to rise. Workers described the early structure as something surreal, ribs of metal, stretching across the floor like the frame of a mechanical whale. The space seemed too small, even though it was one of the largest manufacturing sites ever built. Piece by piece, the giant took shape, its wings expanding wider than any runway floodlight could illuminate. 6 engines, each one powerful enough to lift a fully loaded medium jet, were prepared for mounting. They were arranged in a formation that gave the aircraft an unmistakable identity. Their combined thrust would make the plane roar like a creature, awakening from a deep slumber. The landing gear, more complex than that of any aircraft in history, consisted of dozens of wheels arranged to distribute weight across fragile runways. Engineers designed the gear to kneel and adjust to different loading conditions, ensuring stability even under extreme mass. It was engineering poetry written in steel. But the size came with a cost. The aircraft could not rely on traditional materials or tricks used in smaller jets. Everything had to be reinforced, yet remain lightweight enough for flight. Every bolt mattered. Every joint required precision. Mistakes in smaller aircraft could be corrected. Mistakes at this scale could collapse the structure. Teams worked through nights, test-fitting components larger than houses, checking alignment, recalibrating designs that seemed impossible just months before. Aviation experts from around the world quietly observed, waiting to see whether the Soviets could pull off the unimaginable. Outside the hangar, rumors spread. A giant was being built, something the world had never seen. Satellite images captured glimpses of the wings. Analysts speculated about its purpose. Some thought it was a secret military weapon. Others believed it was a space launch system. No one outside the program could have imagined just how gigantic the final machine would become. But inside, the project continued, untouched by speculation, driven only by the mission's urgency. As the final assembly neared, tension grew. This plane wasn't just a technical achievement. It was a gamble of national pride. If it failed, it would become a monument to wasted effort. If it succeeded, it would rewrite the boundaries of aviation. Inspectors walked through the aircraft's cavernous interior, large enough to hold tanks, freight containers, even entire wings of other airplanes. The ceilings soared above them like the inside of a cathedral. Light entered through maintenance openings, illuminating the unfinished belly of a mechanical titan. Then came the moment that marked the shift from creation to animation, powering up the systems for the first time. Engineers across control panels monitored readings. Hydraulic mechanisms hissed. Electrical systems flickered, and the first signs of life rippled through the craft. This was not yet flight, but it was awakening. A massive machine built from millions of parts was beginning to breathe. The crew felt something more than pride. They felt the weight of what was coming. The rollout day was unlike anything the facility had ever seen. Doors that rarely opened were slowly pushed aside to reveal the giant inside. People gathered around, many stepping back unconsciously, as if intimidated by the sheer scale. The plane's nose appeared first. Then the wings extended beyond the edges of the hangar, followed by the towering tail that rose like a monument to human determination. The aircraft dwarfed everything around it. Trucks looked like toys parked near its wheels. Workers stared in silence, witnessing history. The world's largest airplane now stood under the open sky for the first time. Reporters would later describe it as a monster, a creature forged from steel and ambition. But on that day it appeared calm, like a sleeping beast. Its engines had yet to roar, its wings had yet to carve the sky, and its limits were still unknown. But one thing was certain. This aircraft was built not just to fly, but to redefine what flying meant. The giant is ready, but its true power is still hidden. The world waits to see what this machine is capable of. The monster stood on the tarmac, motionless yet overwhelming, as crews prepared it for a moment that would determine its future. The rollout had stunned everyone, but the first flight would decide whether this giant was a miracle of engineering or an impossible dream too heavy to leave the ground. Engineers moved around the aircraft like surgeons around a patient, checking the hydraulic lines, examining the extended landing gear, and monitoring the thousands of sensors connected across its enormous body. Beneath those 6 engines, the air seemed to vibrate even in silence, as if the aircraft held its breath. The runway ahead was long, but no runway truly felt long enough for something of this scale. The ground crew knew that the wings needed clean airflow, the engines needed full thrust, and every system had to work flawlessly. Any imbalance, any hesitation, any miscalculation under this much mass could end the attempt before it even began. Still, the team continued with a calmness earned through years of experience. They had prepared for every variable, every unexpected challenge, every vibration that might hint at instability. Inside the control center, flight engineers reviewed data streaming from onboard computers. Temperatures, pressures, hydraulic flow rates, electrical loads, everything fluctuated within acceptable ranges. But the weight of the moment pressed heavily. The aircraft was ready, but readiness did not eliminate uncertainty. Even the most advanced simulations could only approximate how a machine of this size would react. Once its wheels left the earth, the engines ignited one by one. A deep rumble rolled across the airfield like distant thunder, slowly intensifying into a low-frequency vibration that shook the ground. Birds scattered. Dust rose from the edges of the runway. The 6 D-18T turbofans came alive, each one producing a roar that felt primal, as though the beast was awakening. Even seasoned technicians stepped back as heat waves distorted the air. Behind the engines, this was power on a scale rarely witnessed. As the engines stabilized, the aircraft began to inch forward. The wheels, dozens of them, rotated in harmony, distributing weight with precision. The motion was slow at first, deliberate, almost hesitant. But once clear of the apron, the aircraft aligned with the runway's center line, stretching from one horizon to the other. It paused, gathering strength, preparing for the transformation from grounded colossus to flying legend. The throttles advanced and the roar intensified. The aircraft surged forward, each engine pushing with a force that dwarfed anything in commercial aviation. Acceleration was steady, not abrupt, but the speed climbed with surprising confidence. The giant did not lumber. It surged. The runway vibrated under the strain of millions of pounds accelerating across concrete. Observers held their breath as the wings began to generate lift. At this scale, lift was not an invisible force. It was something people felt in the air pressure around them. Dust swirled, grass flattened, and the air became charged with the movement of a structure, wider than a football field. The nose began to rise, slowly at first, then more decisively. For a moment, the massive landing gear still clung to the ground, resisting gravity's shift. But then, in a single graceful motion, the wheels lifted off the runway. The world's largest aircraft was airborne. Gasps swept through the crowd. Even those who had built it seemed overwhelmed by the sight. The giant climbed steadily, its wings flexing under aerodynamic forces, its engines leaving long trails of heat shimmering behind them. The aircraft gained altitude with an elegance that contradicted its monstrous proportions. Despite its size, it moved with purpose, stability, and surprising poise. From the ground, the aircraft looked almost unreal, as if a floating island had detached itself from the earth and chosen to travel across the sky. The scale made everything else appear miniature. The fire trucks, the buildings, even the runway itself seemed insignificant compared to the floating Titan. The AN-225 was not just flying, it was redefining what could fly. As it reached a safe altitude, test maneuvers began. Engineers monitored telemetry with intense concentration. The aircraft banked gently to the left, then to the right, its massive wings responding with incredible precision. There were concerns that such a long wingspan might twist under load, that the structure might react unpredictably, that stress might accumulate in unseen patterns. But the wings, reinforced with advanced alloys and internal spars thicker than tree, trunks held with unwavering confidence. Every maneuver added more data. Every reading strengthened the case that this monstrosity was not just functional, but reliable. Still, testing remained cautious. The aircraft's limits were unknown, and the team refused to push too far too fast. For now, stability mattered more than speed. Far below, the shadow of the AN-225 passed across fields, forests and rooftops, darkening everything beneath it. People stopped in their tracks, staring upward as the giant crossed the sky. Many had never seen anything like it. An aircraft so large it seemed to reshape the landscape beneath it. Even those unaware of the test flight felt compelled to look up, drawn by instinct to something extraordinary moving overhead. Inside the control center, technicians watched the altimeter rise. The fuel flows stabilize, the temperatures settle into equilibrium. Nothing unexpected. Nothing alarming. It was as if the aircraft, despite its unprecedented scale, had been born ready. But experience taught them not to trust calm moments too easily. Aviation history was filled with success turning to disaster in an instant. So they continued watching, analyzing, double-checking every fluctuation, every twitch on the graphs, every anomaly, no matter how small. After hours of stable flight, the moment arrived for the giant's descent. Landing would be the true test. Liftoff could be achieved with power alone, but landing required precision, control, and complete structural cooperation. The runway waited far below, lined with emergency crews ready for any outcome. As the aircraft descended, airflow buffeted the enormous wings. The landing gear extended, dozens of wheels lowering like mechanical limbs preparing to carry unimaginable weight. The approach remained steady, but tension grew. The smallest misalignment at this mass could mean disaster. Every second felt stretched as the aircraft neared the ground, sinking toward the runway with a grace that belied its size. The wheels hovered just inches above the surface. The wheels hovered just above the runway, inches from making contact. Yet the aircraft seemed suspended in time. The world's largest plane descended, with a silence that felt unreal, compared to the roar that had lifted it into the sky. Every person watching held their breath as the Colossus drifted forward, slower, steadier, controlled by forces that engineers had spent years mastering. The wings, stretched wider than any man-made flying structure on Earth, adjusted minutely, their control surfaces responding to invisible shifts in wind. The aircraft sank lower until gravity finally took hold. The landing gear met the runway with a deep, heavy impact that echoed across the airfield. Dozens of wheels absorbed the shock simultaneously, flexing under the massive load as if awakening from a long sleep. Smoke rose from the tires as friction gripped the asphalt. Slowly, the monster settled fully onto the ground, its weight transferring from air to earth in a controlled descent that tested every hydraulic line, every strut, every calculation behind its creation. A collective exhale rippled through the teams watching. The touchdown had been successful, but the test was not over. The aircraft still carried immense kinetic energy, and the runway was shrinking beneath it. The pilots applied reverse thrust. The 6 engines roared again, this time not to lift the aircraft into the sky, but to force it back against its own forward momentum. The sound was thunderous. Heat waves shimmered backward. Dust and debris swirled behind the giant as it pushed against its own might. Gradually, the speed dropped. The wheels slowed. The vibrations eased. The aircraft rolled to a stop, towering over every vehicle and structure on the tarmac. Silence returned, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. The monster plane had successfully flown for the first time. Crew members gathered around the Colossus, their small figures barely noticeable next to its enormous landing gear. The success meant far more than a completed test flight. It was proof that something once thought impossible could be achieved. But as they reviewed the data, a new realization emerged. This aircraft was capable of far more than simply carrying space shuttles. Its internal cargo bay was longer than any aircraft in the world. Its structural strength exceeded projections. Its fuel capacity allowed it to cross continents without hesitation. It wasn't just a transport aircraft. It was a global lifeline waiting to be unleashed. The Soviet Union quickly understood the potential. Engineers returned to their workstations, refining systems, strengthening components, optimizing weight distribution. They examined stress points on the wings, analyzing how the massive surfaces flexed during flight. They studied heat signatures around the engines, measuring performance at maximum thrust. They tracked the aerodynamic wake patterns trailing behind the plane, patterns that differed drastically from smaller aircraft. Everything about the AN-225 existed on a scale never imagined before. Months passed, and the aircraft began, performing a series of flights that pushed its limits harder each time. It climbed to higher altitudes, flew longer distances, carried heavier internal loads. Every successful test added another layer of confidence. Every completed mission expanded its potential. Soon, engineers allowed the next phase of testing, the reason it had been built in the first place. Carrying cargo on top of its fuselage, transporting objects, externally was far more complex than simply placing them in a cargo bay. The top-mounted loads would distort airflow, shift the aircraft's center of gravity, and increase drag dramatically. Engineers tested new aerodynamic fins, recalibrated control systems, and reinforced the spine of the aircraft. The machine needed to endure forces that no aircraft had ever faced. When the day arrived, the airfield buzzed with anticipation. Mounted atop the AN-225 sat a large test structure, shaped similarly to a spacecraft fuselage. The sight looked unbelievable and already massive. Aircraft carrying something nearly as big as a plane of its own. Workers on the ground appeared like dots compared to the combined structure. The engines roared to life again. The runway trembled. The aircraft accelerated slower this time, its weight and drag increased. But even under this extreme configuration, the giant gathered the momentum it needed. The nose lifted once more and the plane climbed into the sky, the load atop it slicing through the air like a fin on the back of a mechanical whale. From that day forward, everything changed. The AN-225 was no longer just the largest aircraft in the world. It became the most capable. It transported satellites, industrial generators, massive construction equipment, humanitarian supplies, and eventually even entire locomotives. When the world needed something delivered that no other aircraft could carry, it called upon the monster plane. During these missions, the aircraft gained a new reputation, not just as a marvel of engineering, but as a symbol of hope. Natural disasters, humanitarian crises, war zones, wherever infrastructure collapsed, the AN-225 became a lifeline. Entire nations waited for its arrival, watching the horizon for the silhouette of the giant that could carry relief on its back. Its reputation only grew with each mission. The more impossible the task, the more likely it was the AN-225 that would answer the call. But behind every mission came new challenges. The aircraft's size required special runways. Its weight demanded careful fuel planning. Its cargo load sometimes pushed the limits of what even this Titan could handle. Engineers constantly monitored stress cycles on the wings, checking for fatigue. Specialized pilots trained relentlessly to understand how the aircraft behaved at different weights, different altitudes, different speeds. Over time, the monster plane became more than an engineering achievement. It became a global icon. Aviation enthusiasts traveled thousands of miles just to witness a single takeoff. kids pressed their faces against. Airport fences waiting to catch a glimpse of its gargantuan wings. Entire communities paused their routines when it passed overhead, captivated by the shadow that covered the earth beneath it. Yet even with its success, the aircraft remained one of a kind. Only one model existed, one giant, one survivor, one machine capable of reshaping the air around it. And that meant its future carried the same uncertainty that its creation once held. The AN-225 had already achieved what once seemed impossible. It carried impossible loads, crossed continents, and became a symbol of human ingenuity. Yet, as time passed, the aircraft faced challenges beyond engineering alone. Political changes, shifting priorities, and the fragility of being a single machine marvel threatened to relegate it to history. But the monster plane's legend was built on survival, on defying the odds, and it would not fade quietly. Humanity had grown accustomed to its presence. Airport crews knew its schedule. Air traffic controllers adjusted for its wingspan. Enthusiasts counted down the days until its next flight. And when the call came, whether for cargo, relief, or extraordinary transport, the AN-225 answered without hesitation. Its massive engines roared to life like a heartbeat of determination. Its wings flexed to lift incredible weight, and its fuselage carried dreams along with machinery. Each mission told a story. In disaster zones, the monster plane delivered supplies to isolated communities, cut off from the world. Cranes, generators, and even prefabricated housing units were transported to regions struck by floods or earthquakes. Where conventional logistics failed, the AN-225 became hope in metal form. People watched as it descended, wings spanning wider than city blocks, its shadow sweeping over the land like a guardian. Engineers continued to innovate, introducing minor upgrades to extend its life. Every bolt was checked, every engine recalibrated, and every stress point meticulously analyzed. They knew the plane had only one weakness: time. Its structure would fatigue eventually. Its systems could fail. But as long as it flew, it embodied the audacity of human ambition, the belief that even the largest, most unwieldy dream could take flight. Over decades, the AN-225 earned its reputation as more than an aircraft. It became a story. Documentaries, aviation books, and countless photographs immortalized its presence. Air shows displayed its enormous wingspan to gasping audiences. Engineers lectured students about the complex calculations that made its flight possible. Pilots shared tales of its behavior in extreme conditions, and aviation enthusiasts treated it as a living legend. Then came missions that pushed the boundaries even further. Entire industrial plants were transported from one continent to another. Massive space components were carried for international collaborations. Humanitarian aid for entire nations was delivered in a single sortie. Each flight was a reminder that the impossible could be achieved when ambition, skill, and courage converged. Yet the AN-225's legacy was not only in its mechanical achievements. It inspired people around the world. Children who saw its shadow on the runway dreamed of engineering giants themselves. Engineers who studied its design learned lessons no textbook could fully convey. And humanity, in general, witnessed the extraordinary, the scale of what humans could create, and the hope embedded in the courage to try. Despite global admiration, the aircraft remained fragile in another sense. It had no siblings, no backups. Any damage could take it out of service permanently. But even this fragility amplified its mystique. People understood they were witnessing a one-of-a-kind marvel, a true monster of the skies. Its rarity made every flight momentous occasion, and yet it always returned to the skies. Each takeoff was majestic, a symphony of thrust, metal, and aerodynamic grace. Each landing was precise, a ballet of engineering and human skill. And each mission completed reinforced the belief that some dreams are so vast they require more than just imagination. They require courage, expertise, and unwavering dedication. The AN-225 story became more than an aviation tale. It symbolized survival against impossible odds, against political upheaval, technological limitations, and the finite nature of a single aircraft it endured. Against skepticism and disbelief it soared. Against gravity itself it lifted mountains, literally and metaphorically. And through every challenge, humanity learned something profound, that even the largest obstacles could be overcome when knowledge, preparation, and hope unite. In the final analysis, the monster plane is more than its specifications. It is more than 6 engines, 88 wheels, 640 tons of maximum takeoff weight, or 84 meters of wingspan. It is a testament to human audacity. It is a symbol that scale does not deter ambition, that rarity does not limit purpose, and that survival is possible even under the weight of impossible expectations. Even today, when it glides across the horizon, it reminds the world of one simple truth. Humans will always reach for the extraordinary, and sometimes that reach results in a monster that not only survives but inspires generations to come. The legend of the Antonov AN-225, the monster plane, lives on. In its shadow, the world has seen how courage, vision, and skill can turn impossible ideas into reality. And as long as one engine roars, one wing flexes, and one mission succeeds, hope will always take flight alongside it.